The night before the wedding, on October 1st, my fiancée, Natalie White, suddenly disappeared. I went mad searching for her. Then, out of nowhere, she posted a status on her social media, visible only to me. The photo showed her and her first love tightly entwined under the covers, clothes scattered around them. After the initial stab of pain, I suddenly found myself letting out a laugh and liking the post. What are you covering yourselves for? Is the AC set too low? Everyone's dying to see how tightly you're holding each other. Her reply came, mind your own business. Lazy people have too much time on their hands. I didn't hesitate. I removed the groom's tag from my chest and walked outside to tell all the family and friends gathered at the venue. The wedding is canceled. I'll be returning all the wedding gifts. Eat, drink, and be merry. Though my voice wasn't loud, the entire venue fell silent for a moment. Everyone was stunned. I didn't linger. I just strode out of the hotel. My parents chased after me, asking what had happened and why I was canceling the wedding. It was something that concerned both families' reputations. I blinked back tears and said, I can't take it anymore. They were silent for a moment, but instead of urging me to go through with the wedding for the sake of appearances, they embraced me and offered their support. They knew me too well. They knew I wasn't one to make rash decisions unless I had been terribly wronged. Natalie's affair and her brazen attitude about it were all because she relied on my boundless indulgence and compromise. Back when we were in love, she told me in my heart, you will always be the one. Now those words had shattered, turning into nothing more than mockery. No matter how much I cared for her, no matter how I always forgave after every argument, it never moved her. It only led to her brazen affair and then blaming me for meddling in her life. I suddenly felt lost, but quickly woke up from that stupor. I asked myself, does someone like her, a heartless, promiscuous woman, deserve my love? The answer was clear, no. I gathered myself, called a cleaning crew, and had all of Natalie's belongings cleared out. As for the one photo we had together, I burned it with a lighter, erasing the last trace of our memories. Then, I hired a moving company and sent everything to her house. She called me immediately, furious. Evan Turner, what's the meaning of this? I didn't wait for your pickup and instead, a moving truck shows up. Have you lost your mind or did the door hit you on the way out? Why are you playing this game? If you don't come and pick me up in half an hour, I want an extra $300,000 in dowry. And don't forget the $5,000 for the relatives just to save face. In the past, I would have done anything to meet her demands, even if it meant borrowing money to pay the dowry. After all, marrying her had been my dream. But now, I just smiled coldly and replied, who you marry and how much dowry you get is none of my business. I've got better things to do than worry about your drama. Go find Maxwell King instead. You two were so busy last night. He's not going to let you suffer, is he? I laughed as I typed it. Not putting up with her anymore felt so satisfying. You think I care about your face? Natalie White's temper exploded on the other side of the phone. Well, if I have to spend my life with someone like you, I'm allowed to fulfill my wishes before the wedding, right? What's wrong with that? Are you really using this as a way to trap me? You're a fool. You don't deserve to have conditions. Get over here and pick me up, or we'll lose face. She was completely unashamed and acted like it was an honor for me to wear the green hat. I answered coldly, not my problem. Go find Maxwell King. Since you two are so in love, I'll help you out. As they were so in love, I had no qualms letting them have each other. Who doesn't know that you, Evan Turner, were just my little puppy? I'm not scared you won't come pick me up. Natalie hung up, clearly planning her next move. Maybe she thought I'd beg her, offer money, or make concessions. But I was done with that. I took a screenshot of the status she had posted the previous night, along with the mocking messages Maxwell King had sent me, and posted them on my own social media. When Maxwell found out I was marrying Natalie, he immediately mocked me for being a green turtle who couldn't win her heart, only her body. 7 years of love, like a dream. Turns out I was just a supporting character from the start. Wishing you and your true love, your first love, a long and happy marriage. Not long after I posted it, my social media blew up. The news quickly spread through my university alumni group. Everyone now knew that I had been a fool. They knew what Maxwell King and Natalie White had done. Natalie White bombarded me with messages. Turner, today was supposed to be our wedding, and you're posting this sad little drama. You were supposed to marry me and now you're whining and complaining. Is this funny to you? You're happy because our family looks bad, aren't you? I can't believe you've turned into this. My parents treated you like their own son. She kept texting me, but I couldn't be bothered to respond. Then her father called to ask for an explanation. Natalie White's father had always treated me well. I respected him deeply, especially because I came from a rural background and had no connections. I had never expected to marry into such a family. At first, I was just content with being a chemistry teacher. Back in college, Natalie White's father took a special interest in me. Due to my hard work, he became very fond of me, even taking me on as his personal disciple. I gained access to resources I had never dreamed of, and after graduation, I landed a job at a big corporation, completely changing my life. It was also through Natalie White's father that I met her. He played matchmaker, and our early relationship was nothing short of beautiful and dreamlike. We made vows, promising to miss each other when apart. But before long, Natalie White became distant and uninterested. Then her childhood crush, Maxwell King, returned from abroad, and the dynamic between us suddenly shifted. One day, I found a folder on Natalie White's phone named Baby, and inside were countless photos of Maxwell King. That was when I realized, deep down, Natalie White had always held a torch for him. I thought that with time, my passionate love would change her heart and keep her by my side. But I was wrong. The scraps of affection I gave her could never compare to the crescent moon hanging high in the night sky. In gratitude, I forced myself to accept Natalie White, but I just couldn't do it anymore. So, I gave up. After I explained everything to her father, he fell silent for a long while. Ben sighed heavily and said, "Evan, I'm sorry for this." Before hanging up, in the afternoon, Natalie White and her group of friends stormed into my house. I told my parents to stay inside while I dealt with it. In the past, I would have held my tongue and kept silent, still holding on to a glimmer of hope and love for Natalie White. But did she really think I was a pushover? Without my dad, who do you think you are now? You're reduced to a beggar on the street. How dare you cancel the wedding? You're nothing but trash. Natalie White pointed a finger at me and began yelling. Her friends chimed in. You're always talking about gratitude, and this is how you repay the White family. Pathetic. Natalie marrying you was her blessing, and you can't even appreciate it. Go down to the neighborhood and beg Natalie for forgiveness. Then we'll talk about having the wedding again, and maybe she'll forgive you. Their voices buzzed like sparrows on a telephone pole, loud and incessant. If this were before, I would have lost my temper and shouted back. But now, there wasn't a ripple of emotion inside me. I just smiled coldly. Natalie White loves Maxwell King. What's wrong with me letting them be together? If you two love each other so much, why doesn't Maxwell King come and marry you at this crucial moment? You've been in bed with him hundreds of times. Marrying you should be no big deal, right? I fired off 3 quick jabs, and her friends were left speechless. Even Natalie White's face turned pale. She froze for half a minute before speaking again. You know, my dad doesn't like Maxwell King. How dare you say such things? It's disgusting. Think what you want. Whoever you marry, it has nothing to do with me. When you get the chance, let's go file for divorce. I said flatly. You. You fine, Evan Turner. I'll give you credit for having some guts today. Natalie White was furious and turned to leave. One of her friends asked, Aren't you afraid Evan Turner really will divorce you? Natalie White responded confidently. When you throw a bone to a hungry dog, it'll come crawling back. I heard it and couldn't help but laugh. I called up a few friends, and we went out for drinks and skewers. After a few rounds of drinks, the night had fallen. Then, suddenly, Natalie White's father called, his voice frantic. Evan, something's wrong. Your teacher's wife had a heart attack and collapsed. It's very serious. Don't you know a famous heart specialist? Could you please bring him in? I snapped to attention. I contacted the heart specialist immediately, then asked my friends to drive me to the hospital. When I arrived, Natalie White's father was pacing nervously outside the emergency room. Natalie White sat in a chair with her arms crossed, but when she saw me, she snorted. Looks like a dog is still a dog. The bone hasn't even been thrown, and it's already crawling back. Get on your knees, and maybe I'll consider forgiving you. Before I could respond, Natalie White's father frowned and snapped at her. Natalie, what are you thinking at a time like this? Evan is the one who called me. He knows a heart specialist. Please, if it weren't for Evan canceling the wedding, your mother wouldn't have had the heart attack. Natalie White scoffed. You ungrateful daughter. It was you who was playing both sides. Hanging on to Maxwell King, that's what caused your mother's collapse. And now you're blaming Evan. Natalie White's father was shaking with anger, his chest tight. I quickly stepped forward to support him, telling Natalie White to keep quiet, but she was getting more worked up. Evan Turner, you're always a lapdog, relying on my dad to get ahead. I asked him to take Maxwell King as his disciple, but you took the spot. Then you suck up to my dad, trying to force me into marriage. You're just pathetic. Natalie White stood tall, sneering. Stop talking nonsense. Evan's abilities are way beyond Maxwell King's. It was me who pushed for this relationship. Natalie White's father quickly defended me. I turned to Natalie White and asked, be honest. From the start of our relationship until now, when did I ever pressure you into marriage? Everything has always been about you. I've already shown you who Maxwell King really is and provided evidence, but you refuse to believe it. Now you're head over heels in love with him. So what's wrong with me letting go now? Hearing my question, Natalie White didn't care to respond. She just went on ignoring me. Well, since it's come to this, let's just get a divorce. I'll meet you at the Civil Affairs Bureau tomorrow at 9 o'clock. You all don't believe that Maxwell and I can make it, but I'm going to prove it to you. By the way, I also have evidence of what you did to Maxwell behind his back. Just wait and see. With that, Natalie White stood up and walked away. Ungrateful daughter. If you walk out today, don't even think about coming back. Her father, red-faced and furious, made a harsh declaration, but Natalie White didn't even look back. Ahem, her father, devastated, broke into tears, his hands clutching his chest. If I hadn't been there to support him, he would have collapsed right then. I didn't know how to comfort him. At that moment, the emergency room door opened, and the doctor stepped out, giving me and Natalie White's father a long, sorrowful look. We did our best. What? Natalie White's father's face turned pale, and he immediately fainted from the shock. The doctor and nurses rushed to resuscitate him. I hadn't expected that Natalie White's actions would push her own father to this point. Even worse, when I gave Natalie the heartbreaking news, not only did she not respond, she blocked and deleted me. It was truly disheartening. Luckily, after being rushed to the hospital, Natalie White's father was okay, but he was inconsolable over the loss of his wife. Tears streamed down his face as he mourned. I took on the responsibility of handling her funeral arrangements. After all, she had been like a mother to me. One day, as a teacher, a lifetime as a father, this was my duty. The next day at 9 a.m., I arrived at the Civil Affairs Bureau. Not long after, I saw Natalie White and Maxwell King walking up hand in hand, their faces beaming with joy as if they were a newlywed couple. Evan Turner, did you see that? The diamond ring Maxwell bought for me is so much bigger than the one you bought. As soon as Natalie White stood in front of me, she raised her left hand, showing off her wedding ring. In the sunlight, it indeed glittered, but I could tell at a glance that it was a fake. I didn't bother pointing it out, though. I said, seriously, your teacher's wife passed away. Before I could finish, Natalie White cut me off, raising her hand to interrupt. Do you think I'm a Stop trying to fool me with such lies. She still didn't believe me. Maxwell King, standing beside her, sneered. Evan Turner, wow, you really have some nerve. You're cursing your own teacher's wife, the one who treated you like family. How disgusting. I'm not lying again. I was cut off. Stop wasting your breath. It's too late for regrets. Just divorce her already. Natalie White's voice was cold. No matter what I said after that, she refused to believe me. Even when I presented the hospital certificate, she claimed it was forged. She dismissed everything as just a dirty tactic I was using to frame her and her father. Left with no choice, I gave up arguing and filed for divorce. The papers were light, but they ended years of love. Natalie White didn't show any regret or sadness. She simply turned around and went with Maxwell King to get their marriage certificate. As they walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, she turned to mock me. I'm going on a honeymoon with Maxwell now. You can stay home and eat dog food. By the way, there's going to be a big show soon, a punishment for all of you who've wronged Maxwell. She said that without looking back and walked away with Maxwell King. A show? I was stunned. I couldn't recall doing anything wrong, let alone having any dirt on them. Maybe it was just something she said in anger, so I didn't think much of it. I poured all my attention into handling the funeral arrangements. On the third day of the mourning period, I received a call from the company's chairman, informing me that someone had reported me for misconduct, claiming I had interfered in Natalie White and Maxwell King's relationship. Before I had a chance to submit a written response, the scandal had already blown up in the gossip news. Photos of Natalie White and Maxwell King from their childhood, showing their close relationship, were splashed all over the internet. Confused netizens began calling them childhood sweethearts. I was portrayed as the villain who stole someone else's love. I couldn't provide a single photo to prove how much we had once loved each other. The public outcry was so overwhelming that it put enormous pressure on the company, forcing them to suspend me temporarily and demand that I respond. My parents were also caught in the crossfire. When they went for walks around the neighborhood, people would point and whisper, "Did you hear? They raised a monster." They climbed the social ladder by licking the boss's boots. And now they're trying to steal Maxwell's woman. What kind of parents raise a son like that? All greedy and lecherous trash. The insults made it impossible for my parents to hold their heads high, and it caused me immense psychological pressure. Fortunately, Natalie White's father stepped in and cleared things up, reaching out to a media outlet to explain the situation. The school I attended also released my academic transcripts, proving that I was a top student. The tide of public opinion began to turn. So, the villain's the one who cried first. Natalie White and Maxwell King, these shameless scumbags. They cheated right before the wedding and even posted that on social media to provoke their fiancé. What is wrong with Natalie White? What a piece of work. In ancient times, these two would have been drowned in a pig cage. The internet was flooded with criticism of Natalie White and Maxwell King. I thought the storm was finally over, but just as one wave had subsided, another one rose. The next day, another news story emerged, claiming Maxwell King had a hard life, trying to study while being bullied by me and Natalie White's father, forcing him to drop out of school. It came with the recording as proof. In the recording, Natalie White's father could be heard yelling at Maxwell King, "Get out! Get the hell out of here! With me around, you'll never get a spot for a scholarship. You're 1,000 miles behind Evan Turner." Just those two lines sparked another wave of online outrage. I remembered this event well. At the time, Maxwell King had asked Natalie White's father for a recommendation letter to secure a research position. attempting to manipulate the system behind the scenes. But he was flatly rejected by Natalie White's father, who was furious and scolded him harshly. What Maxwell King didn't expect was that he secretly recorded the conversation, cutting out parts, and used it as evidence to accuse both me and Natalie White's father of bullying him. It was laughable. Natalie White's father had intended to clarify everything through the media, but I stopped him, telling him to focus on dealing with her mother's funeral first. As for the accusations, there would be others who'd speak on our behalf. After all, Natalie White's father was a well-known professor, and the university would undoubtedly defend its reputation. That evening, Maxwell King couldn't wait any longer and called me. "Evan Turner, are you scared yet? Give me something and I won't bother you anymore." Maxwell King chuckled smugly. "What do you want?" I deliberately asked. "$1 million for a hush payment." Maxwell King sneered. "Dream on." I hung up and saved the recording, then posted it online that night. The university took action, releasing Maxwell King's academic record. Not a single class had he passed. In fact, he had missed several retakes and had received 2 major disciplinary violations for breaking school rules. At the same time, my fellow colleagues started speaking up online. Maxwell King is a lazy good-for-nothing who relies on his family's money. He spends all his time partying and bullying the less fortunate dorm mates. One poor student was bullied by Maxwell King until they developed depression, and it took them 3 years to recover. Maxwell King is a player who switches girlfriends faster than he changes clothes. He told everyone he was studying abroad, but in reality, he was expelled. He only made up the excuse to avoid embarrassment. With that, Maxwell King and Natalie White's reputations were completely ruined. They hastily deactivated all their social media accounts, clearly terrified of facing a flood of online abuse. Even so, it was going to be tough for them to stand firm in this city. No one wants to hire a rat that's been scorned by the public. Because of the immense debt the White family owed me, my parents insisted that I fulfill my filial duty and attend the funeral of my teacher's wife. I wore mourning clothes and stood vigil at the family altar. Personally seeing her to her resting place and bowing 3 times at her grave, I prayed for her soul to rest in peace. After finishing the funeral rites, I didn't immediately return home. I wanted to stay with Natalie White's father, ensuring that he wouldn't harm himself in his grief. Meanwhile, Natalie White still hadn't returned. Instead, her teacher's former students came one by one to pay their respects. Finally, after half a month, Natalie White returned. Compared to her usual lively, glamorous self, she now exuded a sense of defeat. "What are you doing back here?" As soon as Natalie White's father saw her, his anger flared. Natalie White, however, seemed unfazed, pointing at me and saying, "Why can he, an outsider, come, but I can't? Dad, Maxwell, and I invested in a business, and we urgently need $1 million. Transfer it to me right now." She was so assertive, acting like a creditor demanding payment. I furrowed my brows and couldn't help but say, "You come back asking for money, and you don't even care about the family. What's there to care about when I can eat and drink? Besides, this is my house. You have no say here." Natalie White laughed coldly and turned to explain to her father, "This business is sure to make big profits. They say we can earn 170% returns." Hearing this figure, I knew Natalie White had been swindled, so I warned her. "There's no investment that guarantees such high returns. Don't let Maxwell King trick you." Such a cheap lie was something only Maxwell King could come up with. "That's none of your business," Natalie White snapped, glaring at me. Her father then slammed his hand on the table, his voice booming. Get out now. Do you know what's happened at home these past few days? And those rumors online? This is all your revenge, right? I no longer recognize you as my daughter. Whether you live or die, it's none of my concern. Get out of my sight." Natalie White had skipped her mother's funeral, gone off on a honeymoon, and then smeared her father's name. Anyone would find it impossible to accept. Had I been someone with a shorter temper, I might have chased her around the house with a broom. "Dad, all you care about is Evan Turner, an outsider. You don't care about me at all. You won't give me the money. Fine, I'll ask Mom. She'll definitely give it to me." With that, Natalie White stormed toward the bedroom. As she saw the black and white photograph on the wall, she froze. It took her 2 full minutes to snap out of it. Then she turned to her father and asked, "Dad, what's this? What happened to Mom?" She started choking on her words, her eyes welling up. "On the night you left, she couldn't be saved. She passed away." Her father sighed deeply. Thinking back to that night, the elderly man broke down again, tears streaming down his face. "No, this can't be. Evan Turner called in a heart specialist. Why didn't I know about this?" Natalie White turned and glared at me, shouting, "Why didn't you tell me? Why? I did tell you that night, but you blocked me. The next day, I filed for divorce, but you didn't believe me. You only cared about going on your honeymoon with Maxwell King." I responded coldly. Instantly, Natalie White was silenced. She recalled everything that had happened and broke down completely, collapsing to the floor. I shook my head slightly. To be honest, Natalie White never truly cared. Otherwise, how could she have forgotten all the times I reminded her? You're not even living here. Natalie White's father turned to her and said, Evan, as a beautiful son, is here to see her off. That's why he has the right to stand here. From now on, I'll leave everything to him. The look in Natalie White's father's eyes was full of disappointment. Sorry, Dad, I've been neglectful. I'm sorry. I'll make sure to take care of you from now on. Natalie White kept bowing, trying to show her repentance, but her father remained unmoved. Natalie, are you truly regretful, or are you just after the family fortune? Are you hoping to partner with Maxwell King for investments? Her father's question left the room in stunned silence. Though it wasn't my place to intervene in family matters, I couldn't help but feel that Natalie White cared more about her inheritance than anything else. She loved Maxwell King so much that she was willing to sacrifice everything for him. To her, everyone else paled in comparison. Seeing Natalie White silent, her father sighed and waved his hand. You can go now. With those 3 words, it seemed as if Natalie White's father had aged another decade in an instant. Dad, Natalie White refused to give up, screaming in frustration. I'm your daughter. What's Evan Turner? He's just an outsider. Why are you giving your fortune to him, and not me? Why? What did he say to you to convince you like this? She had barely finished speaking when her father countered sharply. What did Maxwell King say to you? Natalie White stood tall and replied, He's willing to give everything for me. He loves me unconditionally to the ends of the earth. He's interesting and he's so much better than Evan Turner in every way. I couldn't help but laugh. That's what love does. Blindness. I had seen enough. Back in the day, Maxwell King's family had money. So yes, he was more successful than me. But now, Maxwell King couldn't even reach the heels of my shoes. That ha. Natalie White's father shook his head. Didn't you see all the online reports? His character is a complete disgrace. That's all slander by Evan Turner. Natalie White glared at me again. Unable to hold my tongue, I asked, slander. Do you really think that's what it is? And let's not forget, didn't you all start the rumors first? You're just after our family's wealth. Natalie White refused to listen to reason, convinced only of her own version of the truth. At that point, I couldn't even be bothered to argue further. Natalie White's father took a deep breath and asked, Natalie, do you know why I've always been against you and Maxwell King? HMPH, you've been brainwashed by Evan Turner, Natalie White said confidently. Her father shook his head. Many years ago, I had an excellent young woman working under me. She was tricked by Maxwell King into an affair and ended up pregnant. In the end, Maxwell King refused to take responsibility. He only gave her $50 for a bus ticket to get an abortion. If I hadn't known he was the son of an old acquaintance, I would have exposed everything and never covered for him. Natalie White froze upon hearing this, her face scrunching in disbelief. No, that's impossible. Maxwell isn't like that. Believe it or not, it doesn't matter anymore. The bond between us, father and daughter, is broken, her father said bitterly, as if the weight of those words had broken something inside him. You can leave now. His voice was final. Don't go, Natalie. Her father didn't want to say anything more, motioning for me to help him back to his room. I did as he asked. Evan Turner, you just wait. You won't get my fortune, Natalie White snapped as she stormed off. In truth, I had no interest in the White family's fortune at all. But Natalie White clearly thought otherwise. That same day, she sent me a lawyer's letter, and a few days later, I received a court summons. She was suing me for attempting to steal her family's wealth and for supposedly brainwashing her father. However, the court didn't buy her one-sided story. They had Natalie White's father undergo a mental stability assessment, which confirmed that he was in full control of his faculties. Ultimately, they dismissed all of Natalie White's claims. The inheritance belonged to Natalie White's father, and he was free to leave it to whomever he wished. Concerned that Natalie White's father might feel isolated at home, I decided to bring him to live with me and take care of him. That day, my parents prepared a feast. Natalie White's father was so touched that he cried, telling me that having me as a disciple made his life complete. That was the highest compliment I could receive. In the following days, Natalie White and Maxwell King disappeared from my life. I returned to a normal routine, successfully closing a deal with a foreign client. The chairman invited me to dinner that evening. At the dinner table, there was also a tall, beautiful woman, Mia Carter, the chairman's daughter, who had just returned from abroad. We exchanged contact information, and the chairman, who seemed to be matchmaking, encouraged Mia to learn how to handle company affairs with me. We clicked immediately, understanding each other's ideas effortlessly. But that day, as Mia and I were discussing a project, my secretary burst in, informing me that someone downstairs had put up banners accusing me of brainwashing the old man and stealing his wealth. I looked out the window and saw Natalie White, accompanied by more than 10 people, yelling loudly and drawing a crowd of onlookers. Do you want me to come with you and handle this? Mia Carter asked kindly. No, I can handle it myself. I gave Mia a reassuring smile and went downstairs to face Natalie White. I had anticipated this scene. Even if Natalie White wouldn't go this far herself, Maxwell King would surely manipulate her into causing trouble for me. Evan Turner, you have no shame deceiving my father and trying to inherit my family's wealth. Have you lost your conscience? Natalie White pointed at me, berating me loudly. Behind her, more than 10 people echoed her, shouting for me to return the money. I smiled faintly and said, Natalie White, your information is outdated. Why don't you ask your father's lawyer? I don't want a single penny of the White family fortune. I've already donated it all to children in the mountains to help them realize their dream of going to school. At my words, Natalie White and the others immediately changed their expressions. They looked utterly stunned. The crowd around us erupted in laughter. How can you even have the face to ask for the money? Your own father would rather give it to an outsider than you, his daughter. Maybe you should think about your own issues, trying to morally guilt-trip others. And yet, they've already made donations. Meanwhile, you're the one looking like a clown. The comments had Natalie White looking like she wanted to dig a hole and crawl into it. She was so embarrassed she hurriedly ran off. Her exit, as chaotic as it was humiliating, I turned and went back to the company only to find Mia Carter standing at the door. You're not a greedy person. Mia Carter smiled and said, just living a peaceful life is enough. If it's not mine, I won't take it, I replied indifferently. You're the most charming man I've ever met. Mia Carter nodded. I froze for a moment, and by the time I came to my senses, Mia Carter had already blushed and run off. For some reason, my heart began to race. Over the next few days, our relationship quickly heated up, and we spent every moment together, but neither of us mentioned taking it further. The chairman, seeing everything unfold, couldn't hold back anymore. He called me and Mia Carter into his office for a talk. I confessed my feelings for Mia, and without hesitation, she smiled and agreed. The chairman, sensing our connection, gave us a day off to go out and enjoy ourselves. So, I took Mia Carter to a unique Western restaurant in the city. But while we were eating, we saw Maxwell King with a woman around 50 years old. Maxwell, my feet are so sore, the older woman said, a smirk on her face. Without a word, Maxwell King immediately dropped to the ground like a dog, lifting her right foot and massaging it as if it were the most precious thing. Is the pressure okay? He asked with a grin. Everyone around stared, stunned. But Maxwell King didn't care at all. If anything, he worked harder. The woman, enjoying the attention, ate her meal and said, this feels perfect. Later, I'll take you to check out a car. Thank you, Zoe Morgan. Maxwell King's eyes lit up at her words, his grin almost reaching his ears. Mia Carter and I exchanged glances, utterly baffled. A man kneeling like this, it was degrading, to say the least. But Mia and I decided not to interfere, picking a seat further away. However, just then I saw a familiar figure rush into the restaurant. It was none other than Natalie White. What do you think you're doing, King? Natalie White stormed up to Maxwell King and grabbed his ear, yelling at him furiously. I cook for you at home, and you're out here flirting with other women. My dad was right. You really are. I was so wrong about you. You said your investments failed, but I think you've been spending the money on this trashy, fat woman. What's so great about her? Look at her figure, her face. Can she compare to me? The more Natalie White raged, the angrier she got. In the end, she flipped the table, causing a huge commotion. Everyone in the restaurant turned to watch. The older woman's smile instantly froze. She kicked Maxwell King off her feet and snapped, who is this woman eating my food, drinking my drinks, and still messing around with other women? Maxwell King quickly tried to explain. This woman is pursuing me. I didn't want to get involved with her, but she started spreading rumors about me. Zoe Morgan, you have to help me. I was stunned by Maxwell King's shamelessness. It hadn't even been that long since his wedding, and here he was already flirting with someone else. Mia Carter wore a look of helplessness. At that moment, the older woman lifted her chin, staring at Maxwell King, asking, are you telling me the truth? Is everything you said true? Of course, Maxwell King nodded like a chicken pecking at rice, completely ignoring Natalie White. Don't talk nonsense. Natalie White's anger exploded, and she slapped Maxwell King across the face. The sharp sound of the slap echoed throughout the restaurant. Maxwell King, furious, stood up and slapped her right back. The force of the slap sent Natalie White spinning, and she fell to the ground, her face swelling as a bright red handprint appeared. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. She looked up in shock, yelling at Maxwell King, you hit me. You said you'd always be loyal to me. Before she could finish, Maxwell King slapped her again. Good job. The older woman clapped with glee. Maxwell King's eyes lit up, and he rolled up his sleeves, delivering slap after slap to Natalie White's face. The slapping sounds rang out one after the other. Natalie White's face was visibly swollen, turning into a grotesque mess. The older woman, thrilled by the spectacle, clapped again and pulled out a bank card from her purse, handing it to Maxwell King. There's $100,000 in here for your pocket money. Thank you, Zoe Morgan. Maxwell King smiled wide, then grabbed Natalie White by the hair, treating her like trash, and threw her out of the restaurant, all for the sake of making the rich woman smile. I watched it all, but not a shred of sympathy was in me. After all, this was all Natalie White's doing. Despite multiple attempts by both me and her father to advise her to keep her distance from Maxwell King and not get too close, she never listened. Now that this was the outcome, it was simply a case of reaping what she sowed. After Mia Carter and I finished our meal, we left the restaurant and found Natalie White sitting alone by the greenery, her eyes devoid of any spark. But the moment she saw me, she rushed over, grabbing my leg tightly. "Evan, help me. Maxwell King tricked me. He's such a liar. I hate him. It turns out everything you said before was true. I should have believed you," she sobbed. "I called a moving company to have everything sent to her house." Natalie White cried uncontrollably. People never look back until they hit a wall. They won't shed tears until they see the coffin. What good is regret now? I looked at her coldly, unfazed, and said, "We're already divorced. Please don't bother me again." Natalie White shook her head desperately, shouting, "Evan, I've always liked you. Really? I love you. I'll change. I'll be devoted to you. I won't fool around with anyone else. Please give me another chance." As she spoke, she kept bowing deeply, repeatedly. I furrowed my brows, feeling frustrated. Mia Carter, standing beside me, chuckled and said to Natalie White, "You're not regretting it. You're just upset because no one wants you now." She then wrapped her arm around mine, clearly staking her claim. Natalie White sized up Mia Carter, her face instantly filled with shame and self-doubt. She didn't say another word and slowly let go of my leg. I couldn't be bothered to say more. I wrapped my arm around Mia Carter's waist, but just as we were about to leave, I suddenly heard Natalie White shouting, "Maxwell King, I'll kill you." I turned around to see Maxwell King lying on the ground in agony, clutching his stomach. Natalie White stood over him, holding a fruit knife and laughing maniacally. The surrounding onlookers quickly backed away in fear. "Let's go." "Mia, okay, since we were already separated, whether Natalie White lived or died was none of my concern. The only thing I needed to focus on now was cherishing the people around me and loving them."